Can somebody tell me what the Sam hell is going on around here?
Well, we can't, sir.
Who are you?
We're the Monster Squad.
What's going on, everybody? Now that the sound works, we are back, and this is fun. History will not remember the blunders, but they will remember the glory, much like the Monster Squad that eventually found its audience. Now, everybody, if you want to hear the juicy beginning of this interview, you got to go to strangerradio.com to hear that first glorious 10 minutes. But in the meantime, we will catch up to ourselves because we were talking about how the movie did not come out to favorable reviews. You pretty much created the tween movie because it's not for kids, it's not for adults, but it's that great little place in the middle. But it did find an audience eventually. Now, let's talk about something like really positive. When did you start to think that the other shoe dropped for the Monster Squad? You know, like it finally found its audience. When did you think that happened?
Well, it was really, over the years when it kind of came out and died, 18, 19 years of that, it was really you would run into people, they'd know it, in college, I had classmates and teammates that knew of it, plus some of my other work, that, we were mentioning before earlier in the day. But, so it was just sort of part of a larger kind of, resume, so to speak. But I realized that there were some fans around and it was kind of obscure. I was like, oh, you saw it. Great. But it wasn't until April of 2006 when Eric Vespi and a couple other folks in Austin, Texas teamed up with the Alamo Drafthouse, the original one in downtown that was, always did some cast reunion and retro and kind of reunion screenings. And they got in touch with me and a couple of the other gang and was like, hey, do you want to come to town? We want to show Monster Squad on 35 millimeter. And we were like, really? Why? Do you think it's going to sell? Do you think people will come? And Eric Vespi, who's a movie critic of some note and a good friend of ours now, was like, look, I just want to see this film on the big screen in 35, and we'll get the Alamo to kind of market it as one of their special events. And they sold out on their pre-tickets like in a day or two. They added a second screening on the same night, and we went on like Easter weekend and showed up in Austin, Texas, and they turned away people at the door. And that double screening almost at midnight on a Saturday on Easter weekend in 06 really kind of lit the fuse that kind of launched the rocket that has been the last 10 or 12 years of this Monster Squad resurgence. And it was just crazy. It led to convention appearances and, me and the other castmates sometimes traveling around the country and the world doing special screenings, going to Comic-Con, and just kind of nonstop for 10 years, which was fascinating. And then you just meet all of these fans that are, then we had the internet in 06, 07, 08 now, and they came out of the woodwork and they could find each other and share stories, and it just resurged. And there was no DVD at the time of this movie because it was a dead title. And at that particular time, Lionsgate owned the rights for video distribution, and they sold a ton of DVDs when they released it finally. And they sold out in like the first 72 hours. They had to do another run. They sold out of that. They did another run, and then again in like 2 or 3 weeks after that, it was out of print again because everybody had bought it. And then 2 years later, a Blu-ray came out, and then another 2 years, a different Blu came out, and we just kept going around, and it was interesting. We all thought it was sort of going to die out after about a year or two, maybe 3, and not only has it not died out, it just got stronger and stronger and kept the slow burn upward trajectory of the fan base growing and getting deeper. And second generation fans are now involved. OG original ones, their kids, new kids, middle-aged kids that weren't alive when it came out but saw it in the 90s, latched onto it. Everybody connected with this movie in some way. And over the years of hearing their stories, which there's a lot of cult films, there's a lot of fandom, about films out there, especially as you get older, you want to connect to your youth and when everything was awesome and you felt great about yourself. And those are awesome. Those are great. There's something different about the way Monster Squad connected with these fans. and with the characters or with the monsters or with the stories or with the themes. And that's what resonated and just kept it growing and growing, which led to sort of the inspiration and the motivation to kind of look into that and analyze what that connection was with these people and these fans, whether they were kids or adults when they saw it or college age. And that's what sparked kind of the inspiration to do the documentary.
Speaking of documentary, I'm really glad we brought this up because a little bit of backstory, everybody. Here's the thing. We're going to talk about documentaries, and we're going to get to your amazing movie that we're going to get into it. That's what we're going to get into. But there's this other great movie called Finding Darkness, exclusive look of 80s horror, I believe, and it's produced by Cassandra Peterson, Elvira. Melissa, you love Elvira.
I love Elvira.
And my buddy Yannick, who I believe is watching right now. Hey, Saber, what's going on?
Hi, guys.
Hey, Kristen. His family's amazing. He lent me this great Blu-ray, and your handsome mug just kept showing up. And I'm just like, oh, from Monster Squad, that's cool. And it says, the director of Wolfmans Got Nards. And I'm like, I've been hearing about Wolfmans Got... Oh, my God. Are you telling me a documentary is directed by someone who... I'm a documentor in a little way, okay? Let's say for now, I had to reach out to you. You are a source of a documentary filmmaker. You know, someone would have had to pry your brain open to get all these memories, but you have them yourself. So automatically, no one has a better business to make a Monster Squad documentary than you, in my personal opinion. And when I heard of this connection between you and this documentary, I flipped the fuck out. And immediately, with a little bit of liquid courage, sent you a little message, crossed my fingers, and here we are, So that's amazing. Please tell me, before you tell me about Wolfman's Got Nards and the journey you have gone with that, tell me a little bit about being involved in this Finding Darkness documentary, because it's amazing.
Yeah, when I had known about them, because I think it got kickstarted, about the year before, and they were trying to put it together. And I knew the people that were working on it. I knew people that had been in it, and they have a bunch of giant names in this doc. I mean, they worked on it for, documentaries take a lot of time, and you got to travel, you got to do interviews, you got to do archival footage, etc. And it's a big endeavor. And I didn't know they were going to make like a 30-hour documentary, but it's something like 4 hours. It's amazing. And sort of near the middle of the end of, or the end of when they were doing some interviews, David called me that was working on it and said, hey, would you come in and sit down and do an interview? And I was like, I would totally do that. But don't you have other giant names that you've already, worked on? I hope I can contribute just a little bit. And I know we're going to talk about Monster Squad or the genre growing up in that time. So hopefully something that I say while I sit in the, subject chair, is worth some value, and you can pull, one tidbit out of it. And then people started screening it, and people bought the, the Blu-ray and, as it festivaled around. And apparently people were telling me I keep coming in and out of this documentary, and I hadn't seen it yet. And I was like, oh my gosh, I hope, one, I don't look like a total tool, and two, I hope I don't sound like a total buffoon. And because you never know, like after the fact, you usually, you always hate the way you look or you hate the way you sound. Mm-hmm. And I was like, God, what, I don't even remember what I said. I know we sat in there for about, an hour and a half or something. And boy, what did they pull out? Did like all of their other footage like melt in a fire and they just have, anything from me? I was like, no. But apparently a lot of people, dug the whole thing because it's super in depth and they have some amazing names in that. And I was just fortunate enough to get asked to, be involved. It's always nice to be on the same slate as, gigantic names in any type of genre, but especially horror genre. And, I got to say some cool stuff. And I haven't seen every single tidbit of my bit. I have the disc, so I come in and out and I check it. But it's a lot to absorb. So buy that Blu-ray, support those filmmakers that made it. And In Search of Darkness is, it's 4 hours, but you can, take it in little doses and watch it, an hour a day or something, and you'll enjoy what they put together. And they're actually doing another one about sci-fi, so that'd be awesome. And it was very interesting because that, I think, was, if I'm not correct, I believe it is the first time, like you mentioned, Ryan, I sat down to be interviewed for something, and my title of filmmaker about another film was like the first time that I got to be in that chair, so to speak. So that was kind of special. Because I've made other things, I've made, TV pilots, I've made commercials, shorts, things like that. But to actually be on camera and be credited and noted as a filmmaker for something that you've produced, directed, co-produced and directed, put out. We just finished our festival run at that time.
Wow.
That was kind of cool and kind of special. So now that gets immortalized on a Blu-ray that, tons of people have bought. And it's different than just saying actor. It really is. There's nothing wrong with being an actor. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I love all my actor friends that I grew up with and I meet daily. But to be filmmaker in a genre that you sort of you feel a little special place at the table. And I'm just, I'm glad that people resonated during our festival run for the Squad Doc.
I'm glad you said people resonated watching the Squad Doc. Our friend Chris Vovoda, who is a director of a great movie with Lee.
His wife, Lee Paula Springer.
Lee Paula Springer. That's the thing. I was like, don't get her middle name wrong. I know it's Springer and I know it's Lee. What's in the middle? They saw your movie and Chris told me earlier today, he's like, that guy rules. His movie made me cry. And I'm like, I want it to make me cry too. But what's making me cry is the inability to see it. But maybe someone will happen, maybe won't. I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm doing a little Bobcat golf right there. Sorry about that, but
but that was a good Bobcat there. Yeah, we premiered in the festival run in 2018 and had a lot of awesome festivals, a lot of genre festivals, won some awards. The doc festival all over the world. We had dozens and dozens in the U.S. and in Canada, and even went to the UK, twice to screen it, and got such a great response. And this is a documentary that everybody will enjoy, watching on their couch, when it gets streamed or, on SVOD or when they watch it on the Blu-ray. That's amazing. But something like, Bavoda would say, and I know I see Bavoda out on social media a lot. So what's up, Chris? And thank you for coming and checking out the doc. That's amazing. I love when people say I was there at this festival or I saw it at this screening. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it really is. It makes a difference whether when you watch this documentary with a group of people. And Ryan, you'd mentioned earlier that I was sort of a fountain of resource or whatever. The only brain could make a doc about this because there's different insights. That's true. But what it was is the documentary is not about the movie. We cover the movie. We talk about the release. It's really about the fans, the impact that it had on fans and how it changed some of their lives. And we wanted to tell that story in that way. And that was always super important to me, that it wasn't about myself. It wasn't about the cast.
Okay.
We're all in it. We're all hanging out. We're doing it. I did not want to this is not an auto-bio doc. Because look, I get to see myself and listen to my voice enough. And even when I was making it with my producing partner, Henry McComas from Pilgrim Media Group at the time, he kept, I was like, get me out of there. Like, get someone else on the screen at that point. It's too much me. It's like, get me out of here. And he's like, dude, this is your story. This is your film. And you're the star of the Monster Squad. I can't take you completely out of this documentary. So we tried to find a middle ground of where it was balanced, where I was always really afraid that it was too much, me. And it's not, we balanced it perfectly. I wanted to showcase the other cast members. I wanted to showcase the fans and how we as a cast as a whole and as individuals affected them. And when I came up with the idea and then ended up, doing a deal with Pilgrim Studios, I had no idea that I was going to be able to get lucky enough, and all the things that happened in the subsequent year that weren't in place at the time that we decided to make this documentary. And things just fell into place in a timing that we just captured so much awesome stuff, and it really made the meat of the documentary even better and took it to levels that I would only dream of that we could achieve. And Henry and my team at Pilgrim knocked it out of the park because everybody understood. There wasn't anybody that worked. We had a very small production crew that worked on this from pre all the way to post, and nobody that worked on this film wasn't touched by it or affected by it or weren't fans, but they were all consummate professionals in doing their job. But their love for the original source movie brought a connection to it where they really cared about their job that they were assigned to do. And that's a different thing. You don't get that a lot. So that quality comes through, I believe, and those guys really knocked it out of the park.
Amazing, man. It's always, speaking of casts and crew and stuff like that, we've been talking about the present by looking at the past, but you have a past there too. I looked at your IMDb, dude. You in the 80s, you were everywhere. Before Monster Squad, it's not like you walked in there and your first movie was Monster Squad. You were a working actor. How did you get in the biz, sir?
I was. It's interesting that most people know me from Monster Squad because it became this thing. But that was sort of sandwiched in, just kind of in between a lot of stuff, which I was very fortunate to be able to do. I started very young. I started when I was about 5 years old. I was born and raised in LA, so I didn't have to relocate or do anything like that. But really kind of everything's owed to my older sister, Carlina, who was in the business before I was. She's 6 years older than I was, and she started working very young as well in commercials and print and on TV and films. And none of this would have happened if she wasn't around to be in the business. And then I sort of came up, after that inside of the same kind of, family bubble there. And that became our lives. And, my sister's biggest thing that she's noticed for, she was, if anybody, older film buffs are listening or watching, back in the 70s, there was giant disaster films, produced by Irwin Allen and everybody else. And
nice.
If anybody's ever seen The Towering Inferno,
that sounds familiar.
It's a famous Irwin Allen disaster movie starring Paul Newman and Steve McQueen and this huge ensemble cast. Wow. My sister is the little girl in that movie that Paul Newman saves from the burning skyscraper. So she knows more high-powered people than I do. When she did that movie when she was 6 or 7, and I grew up watching that movie, multiple times a year. It's an amazing picture. It's first time that 2 major studios combined on this giant budget. It was all practical fire. There's no visual effects. There's great stunts. There's great acting. It's a great story.
Wow.
And it's amazing cinematic, piece. So I grew up watching that movie because it's in-house, literally. And then we just kind of grew up in the business. And I got very fortunate enough to be close enough to the industry and be successful enough to get quite a bit of work, like you mentioned. There was, at any one time, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids that are your age group that, want to audition or are auditioning for things. And I would say as we're growing up, I was kind of put the number at about of the overall number of kids in the business, there's probably about 20% that do a majority of the work, right? Oh. And I felt like I was fortunate enough to be a part of that 20%, coming out of the late 70s and going through the early 90s, and establish sort of a resume of work. This is way before IMDb. People could just look things up, and it's just internal industry, and you get fortunate enough to get recast and cast in things. I have a longer list of credits because I sort of had the anti-television career as a kid. Okay. I was the kid that did 5 television series that only went 1 season instead of 1 show that went 5 years that everybody knows, right? And so that was always a little, stick in your craw a little bit, if you will. But I also had a lot more experience than some. Some of my best friends growing up, get on 1 show and that's the thing they do, and they don't do anything else. So there's a trade-off there, sort of. And look, like I mentioned before when we were talking about casting, and I want to get back to Melissa's original question about auditioning, because as an actor, she was interested in that. But everybody, and everybody reads for the same things, and you celebrate or you get grinded down when you didn't get the role you really wanted to, and then some show becomes a huge hit or some movie becomes very well known, and you just got to celebrate. Everybody's in their places, for the right reason, and everybody reads for something that they don't get. That takes place back then. It takes place now. That's just the actor thing. And everybody laments the 1 or 2 roles that they didn't get, or they didn't, they came very close to getting. And it just comes down to someone that you don't know making some choice that may have nothing to do with you. And that's usually my advice for actors auditioning is don't take it personal, because it has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
It has to do with maybe how that person making the decision felt that day, or if they're casting another family member, they've got to cast the kid or the other thing to look like this person, and they just go with someone else just based on hair color or the way they say one word or something, or the way their nose looks. You just don't know. And I've been a part of a ton of those as well. I've also been on the receiving end, so it balances out. And I was very fortunate enough to work quite a bit and have a career that led to being one of the working teen actors and being in teen magazines at the time, and having sort of that teen scene celeb world pinup type thing. Which
Teen
is,
heartthrob.
Speaking of teen,
right? You said it. I didn't.
Oh, I love it.
Speaking of teen, I kind of want to pull up this photo I found on Google. It's
it's going to be one of two, I'm guessing.
Yeah. There's this one where you're kind of dressed like I don't know if you're dressed like a genie or something, but it's
No, I know exactly. Yeah, I know exactly what one you're talking about.
Yeah,
there's a story behind that.
All right, well, let's hear the story about you dressed as the genie cradling some balls, because this is a lovely.
Yes. Boom, boom. Thank you. What that was is, back in the 70s and 80s, there was an annual TV special called Circus of the Stars.
Oh, yes.
And it was during, I think, the holiday times on CBS, I believe. Okay. Big production, big show. And they always got these big celebrities to do circus acts. And if you got selected to, try out for those, they would match you with an act, and you would train for 3 to 4 months in the fall, and then you would shoot the show basically in a circus over the weekend. And they used to shoot it in Las Vegas. And I was fortunate enough at the time I did it for the very first time. I did it when I was 10 years old, and I did an aerial act with Tracy Gold from
Growing Pains.
From Growing Pains. And this is before Growing Pains. She was on another show at the time. And we did a double aerial act, and I was 10, and I think Tracy was 13, I believe, or 14. And I was the youngest person that had ever done that show at the time.
Oh, wow.
And I had got brought into that world by one of my favorite human beings on the planet, Peter Scolari, who was the actor in Bosom Buddies and, a ton of, New York theater and films. You saw him in Bosom Buddies with Tom Hanks back in the early 80s. And Peter and I ended up doing a television show together called Baby Makes Five when I was 10. And Peter's a very accomplished performer, and he's a master juggler. And he taught me how to juggle on the set of that show when I was 10. And so we would go around and perform for people, and we would warm up the audience. And I'm a juggler because of Peter Scolari. I'm out of practice at the moment, but I used to be a decent juggler at one time. And
that's awesome, dude.
He had done the show the year before, so he brought me into that world. And then a couple years later, I was on a show called Mr. President, and I was 14, and I got to do a solo act.
Ladies and gentlemen, the co-star of Mr. President and also the star of the recent film Monster Squad, Mr. Andre Gower.
And I did an act that had never been done on the show called The Low Wire, which I don't like my performance in, but it's a whole other story. But the outfit that you're talking about in the photo it was supposed to be a promo piece for a magazine promoting doing Circus of the Stars that second time, and that top was the top of my circus costume. I was wearing Levi's acid wash jeans or something, and they were supposed to crop the photo just as with the circus element in it, and somehow that pinup ran in a magazine with me wearing a circus top and some acid wash Levi's, and that's everybody's favorite internet photo of me, apparently. Well, because it just looks so incongruous to what's going on, and it makes zero sense, and that wasn't supposed to show the gene.
Well, for what it's worth, man, you look very handsome, and you look good, buddy. You look good. All right. Okay. So turns out you have a lot of fans. Turns out, who knew? But
who knew?
I'm being sarcastic.
Oh my gosh! Okay, sorry.
Are you kidding? Do you know how giddy I was before today? It's just like I was like, oh, I wonder who'll be on the show tonight, and then watched my email for like an hour just to make sure, because I didn't want to tell people, hey, he's going to be on, and then look like a jerk when it's less like, oh, well, it turns out next week's better. You
can't dangle him in front of us and then not.
I can't dangle him and then take him away. All right, but you do have a lot of fans and a huge audience, and I want to answer some of these questions and validate all the people
Fabulous.
who watch along live because they're very sweet. Just a big shout out to Yannick. Big shout out to Alan LeGros, Josh Trager. Jonathan, what's going on, Jonathan? Okay, and my boss, Stephen Strange, he's asking a cool question. He says, he was on the show The Wizard. Can you maybe explain to people what that show was about, and which was a really rad, fun show? Any memories from that TV app?
For sure. Yeah, The Wizard was a show, I believe it was ABC, and I'm blanking on the actor's name, but he was a little person, and he was this genius inventor. And he was such a genius inventor that the government supplied him with like his own personal FBI agent, which was Doug Barr, which had just come off the Fall Guy TV show. And he's this famous inventor, and he has all these cool gadgets, and he goes on adventures and basically solves crimes or solves issues and problems that come up, in his town. And the episode that I was in, ironically, it's very scary and prescient for going forward, but it was super awesome because I played sort of this kind of street kid that lived on an underpass that got hired by the bad guys of the episode to steal a prototype remote-controlled jet airplane from this guy's laboratory, which is in the basement of his house. And so they hired me to befriend him and get inside, and then I sneak in and I steal the airplane to give them the technology. What I don't realize is that their nefarious purposes is they're loading that remote-controlled airplane. It was a jet. It actually worked. This was technology back in like '85.
Wow.
With explosives, and they were going to bring down an airliner with this big delegation on it. So it was like, it was extremely, real world in the future kind of, problem with these kind of this group that wanted to take down this airliner with a remote controlled airplane, which is terrifying to think of nowadays. But what was cool about that episode is that whole cast was awesome. I got to play, the street kid that, steals it, and then we have a redemption scene. And, but what was cool is that technology actually was there. It wasn't fake. So the company that made this plane actually flew it, and I had to pretend like I was flying the plane.
Oh, my God.
And we were in a park in L.A., and this jet airplane on remote is just screaming around Griffith Park. And I was like, if I was ever going to have a remote control airplane, this is the one that I want to have, because all these little those are dumb compared to this thing. And so we had to, team up and save the day and foil the bad guys, and, typical kind of procedural, awesome show on ABC, I think, at the time. And it was just one of my, many guest spots. And The Wizard was awesome. Thanks for remembering that one.
Awesome. Yeah, you know what? Steven always knows how to pull out the gems. In fact, just a little thing, if anyone wants to watch our show from last week, Michael Bean and Jennifer Blanc Bean were on the show, and we found out that Jennifer Blanc provided voices in the movie The Crow and recorded Bible verses that are sprinkled over the soundtrack. And I'm just like,
yes,
God, that's so cool. But I had no idea. I watched the movie for 20 years, and it's the little things that you don't know. So thank you for remembering your career and being able to tell these stories.
Yeah.
We have
another fan question.
Yeah. More fan questions going around. In fact, this is from Melissa's brother, who is a very cool dude. Give big shout out to Nick and Steve, Melissa's brothers. And he has one question. Well, three, actually. But they're very cool.
Okay.
Number one is, am I wrong in thinking that movie contained a fair bit of product placement from Adidas?
Oh, are we doing them one at a time? Yes.
Yeah.
Your memory serves you correct, Nick. There was an inordinate amount of Adidas in this movie. And what that was is, at the time, certain brands and certain products would have an entertainment office in LA around Hollywood, and their PR department would connect with productions and photo shoots and talent, and would just give you product to appear in. And for years I used to get Nike stuff, which was great, and then Monster Squad came around, and that's when Adidas was doing a huge push to be in a lot of the pop culture shows and TV. Run DMC and the Beastie Boy had just made Adidas gigantic. as a streetwear brand, not just an old, European athletic brand. So it was crossing over into kind of like street fashion, and then, got into suburbia fashion, and they started getting into, the high tops and, the crazy sweatshirts and the jackets and things like that. And then, so they would give it to talent and celebrities and things to wear because they want you photographed in it. So when Monster Squad came out, I kind of switched over with Adidas, and that relationship lasted a number of years. Even as I went into college, I'd still get Adidas stuff. And I mean, at one point, I think me and, people like Ryan Lambert and, all of our friends in the crew, I mean, we had over 150, 200 pairs of shoes at one time, and athletic gear and T-shirts. I mean, it's just everything. And you would just go down to the office and fill up bags and, bring stuff home. And I realized that one time I was like, I can't wear 200 pairs of shoes at the time. And, can I share these with somebody? Does someone need these? And, over years and years, you accumulate so much stuff. And I hate to waste things or not give it. And I remember having so much Adidas stuff, even when I was a freshman in college, because I left the industry to go to a small school in North Carolina to play basketball. And I ended up becoming best friends with one of my teammates, Will Coley. And he had a family of 5, and his brothers, they were in elementary school or middle school, but they were as tall as I was when they were like 7 or 8. And I went home for Christmas, and I brought all of my Adidas stuff that I couldn't wear, and I gave them, to his younger brothers, and that felt good. But Adidas was awesome at the time. They had some crazy stuff. They just went wild with the designs, and if you don't remember, just pull up New Kids on the Block 1988 and just see all of the crazy Adidas stuff. So leather jackets and hats and sweatshirts, it's insane. But yes, a ton of Adidas stuff. There was Adidas, Pepsi, Fox Photo, and Burger King, I believe, is the product placements in Monster Squad.
Don't take the church, it's religious.
That's what it is.
Fine. We'll just have to do it right here. Like, really religious, Sean. Why don't we just go over and do it in Burger King?
You guys!
What's funny about Wikipedia and stuff like that is you would think that there would be this large, huge selection of information on the internet, but that's why, films... that's why the DVD of Monster Squad with the special features was so special to me, because for years, I was like, this movie's an anomaly. I don't know anything about it. And then... sometimes on a DVD it really can deliver, and that's definitely another reason why I want to see Wolfmans Got Nards, because I want to connect with the other people that love the movie as much as I did, and apparently that's exactly what it's about. Now Yannick's asking, is there a release date for it? And no, we cannot say stuff we don't know.
I can address it half-assed.
Half-assed away, sir.
We last summer we were in. We had a deal that we were in the middle of to release it, and that was going to happen as soon as the agreements got finalized. For some reason, it didn't happen, and then it bled into the new year, which was this year, and it bled into what's happening with this. Is this happening or not? And COVID hit. And everything kind of shut down for a little bit, and we learned that it was determined that this current deal we're working on is not going to happen. So we had to start from square one again about 2 months ago. But I can report that over those last 2 months, we have made some progress, and hopefully in the next week or so or 3 that there will be a nice big announcement of a completed deal and a release date. I don't know when that's going to be. Otherwise, I would tell you right now, because I've been waiting for a long time. I'll have to either come back on the show or you can update it.
God, please. Oh, please.
He will hold you to that.
And, let's do another commentary. Let's do another commentary.
Absolutely.
Just me and you. And it'll be like the Chris Farley show, where I'm just like, remember when you were in the Monster Squad? That was awesome.
Can we dress in the Swayze and Farley?
Yes. Oh, I dance like Chris Farley,
things?
Especially these days, man. I there is more in me to love since COVID has started. Nick also asked another really cool question, and I have some visuals that we can compare with and stuff like that. He says, over the years, there's been several different Monster Squad posters. Do you have a favorite?
Well, what's great about the resurgence, since '07, coming out with the DVD and all that, or even before that in '06, a lot of the poster art from around the world started getting reproduced and shared. And what's crazy, if you ever like movie poster art and one sheet material, search the international versions of them. They are insane.
Ooh.
And people started collecting those. So international one sheet started coming out. Fan made art came out. People started making their own Monster Squad posters, making their own fan art. And that's something that we actually focus on in the Squad Doc is we really focus on the fan art that's been made over the years. And we feature it in a very unique way. And that was something that was cool to me, because for people to like something, to use their artistic skills to make their own thing was amazing. Poster art, I love our original one sheet. That is an amazing poster. It stands out on its own. It was fresh at the time, and it has been sort of repurposed, or a lot of films kind of copy that style over the years, especially in genre. One thing that a lot of I'll talk about that one sheet and then answer next question eventually this week.
It's all good.
If you notice that one sheet, it's us sitting on the hood of the hearse.
Yeah, we got it up here.
Everybody's in it. Yep, and the monsters are in the background. What a lot of people don't realize is that there is a conspicuous character that is missing from the major North America poster, which was also used in Asia and in the UK. The hero of the movie is not on the movie poster.
What?
Wait, which one?
Phoebe.
Okay,
Phoebe is not there.
I'm like, what? Frankenstein?
Nope. Phoebe is not there. Who ends up being the hero of the movie? She saves the day. She saves us. She saves the world. She saves Frankenstein. What it was a weird thing that we had a photo shoot for that poster, and she had some other commitment. Of course, because she was a working 5-year-old, and she had another commitment on that day. And she wasn't at the photo shoot. And I didn't understand why they couldn't just take a photo of her later, because this isn't a photo poster. It's completely recreated and animated in the art, where they couldn't have just plugged her in. And so it's been a running joke with Ashley Bank, who played Phoebe, when we have conventions and fan appearances and everything, that she gets to sign a poster that she's not on. And so what they used to do, like Alamo did it great a couple years ago when we had the 30th anniversary tour. It was me, Ryan, and Ashley Bank, and we went to 17 Alamos in 17 days across the country. And they printed the Australian one sheet, which is a completely different poster, and it's the only one that Phoebe is on. So that's a good poster. Of the fan art ones, I think the Tyler Stout kind of Mondo poster is really kind of a bitchin' poster. We did that at a special screening in '09, I believe. And I have a copy of that. Tyler was gracious enough to give me one, but that sold well. I love all the fan art stuff. I mean, it's really cool. But if I had to pick one, my wife always gets mad when I pick the Italian one sheet, because it has nothing to do with the movie, and it's so creepy and weird in Italian, and the monsters are dancing, and there's actually like a naked vampire lady on it, like just full. It's not kid friendly whatsoever, and it's not safe for work really. But it's such a weird poster, and that one's always struck me just because it's so insane. And but Italians do that to movie posters. They're awesome.
Amazing. And Nick's third question, I got to ask them all, because I love Nick 3 times as much as the normal human being, because he's been in my life and Melissa's life her whole life, but my life for 9 years. And big shout out, Steve. Her older brother didn't ask any questions, but let's pretend he did, and we'll ask.
We love Steve anyway, but Steve. This Steve counts.
Yeah,
the other Steve doesn't count.
No. What do you mean no? Well, Steve, but he doesn't count. Doesn't count.
All right. Will there ever be a Monster Squad toy line? Why has there never been one, hypothetically? And what would stop them from producing one now? And you dropped your bar, EJ. You dropped your candy bar, EJ.
One, I think there are direct answers to all of those questions. One, why wasn't there? The rights were reserved. The molds and models were kind of in development. If the movie had performed well, there would have been a line of toys. The movie did not, so therefore you don't make toys on a box office bomb. Two, why wouldn't you make them now? Because there's a lot of fans out there that would probably collect them. There's fans out there that make their own, which is awesome. So I'm an action figure that people make on their own, or I'm a fake Funko Pop, which is kind of cool. And I don't know why anybody didn't do just kind of black market Funkos and call them faux pops or something. But I'm sure there already are. But the main reason that there's not a line now, even with Resurgence, is a rights issue. It happens to be one of the things that has held up remaking the movie or rebooting it or doing a sequel over the last 10 or 12 years since the Resurgence. There was always a rights issue of who owned the production and naming rights to this movie. It was something that we had to deal with during production on the documentary. We worked it out. We got it all, kind of thing up, because we have, when you're making a documentary and you're using footage from a source material, you have to get that cleared or either pay for it. When you're making a documentary, you can use the fair use, legal language to show footage from something without paying the licensing fees for those minutes of footage. If you handle the showing of those minutes or those scenes it's a very narrow legal term. It has to be in context. It has to be mentioned, has to be very specific and very precise. We knew that going in. And so everything that we use footage in Monster Squad is used under fair use, and it's buttoned down and cleared legally. There is some stuff that, Ryan, you'll like, because you like DVD extras and behind the scenes stuff. There is some BTS stuff that the world has never seen.
Oh my God.
Of them on the set making of the Monster Squad, that no one has ever seen except for in Wolfmans Got Nards, a documentary. So we got that cleared. Paramount actually owned that. We were able to work out a deal to use it. It's some of my favorite stuff in the film because no one has ever seen it. There's some on the set stuff. There's some BTS actual video, because when we were shooting the Monster Squad, they were actually making a documentary of the production of this giant monster movie.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And the host, which is some of that is the bonus features of the original DVD, but they don't show any of the BTS footage. They just do some of the interviews with cast and crew. We use the BTS footage that no one has ever seen unless you saw this in a festival last year. So when it comes out, people and fans get to see some stuff they've never seen, which is really awesome, and I love when people talk about that. So that's in the movie, and then in the Squad doc, we actually have about 60 minutes of bonus features of little shorts and fun things we did on the road, extended interviews, fan art, slideshow, things like that. So you'll dig the extra features of the doc, but it's a rights issue, with the toy line. For years, starting in 2009, Rob Cohen, who everybody knows as Rob Cohen, giant producer and director, was little known Rob Cohen, who was an associate producer on a little film called The Monster Squad in 1987. When the Resurgence came out, he started the process to remake The Monster Squad and teamed up with whatever studio at the time had claimed the rights, and they went into script development and it didn't come through, and then rights changed and kind of died, which was a good thing. I don't really want to see Monster Squad remade, especially because I don't think they would make it loyal to the original fan base, and that's always tough. They're going to go for a wider new studio audience, and I don't mind if they're making a movie in the same vein, because I'm just taking on the side of the fans that it would hit them really personal if someone messed and remade their favorite movie of all time. So I feel that connection to it. A sequel is a different story.
Yes.
There's some really cool kind of ideas for a sequel out there. I know Fred and Shane have always wanted to revisit it. That may be something because of the rights issue and a timing in the way entertainment law and rights passage goes through, that may have some movement in the next year or so. I don't know. I've always known that there is a really cool audience out there for a sequel. There's also an awesome sequel story that's on someone's. The basic framework of the story has been written. It is awesome.
I will lose my mind.
I did it. It's on my computer. But I don't know if that's ever going to get made. I'm not saying it is. This is not an announcement. I hope Fred and Shane, if they get a chance to work on something, that we get to be a part of it. Because I think that as long as you make it for, this is completely opposite of how business goes in the business goes in entertainment. But if you made it for the fans and worried about that, you'd be fine.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the extra and the large audience that know anything about it. But if you alienate your original core, then you're in for a rough ride. And I don't think they ever would.
That's why I hated Scoob.
Melissa has this really big problem with the recent Scooby-Doo movie. Melissa, we can't take up
No,
the
we
whole
can't
episode.
go. We can't go down that road because I'll just rant like I did a couple weeks ago.
But Melissa,
yeah.
you must have a question for you love this movie as much as I do. Here's the thing, Melissa and I, when we first got together, we're a few years just a few years apart, but just enough where kind of like I was in my wild 20s and she wasn't. And she didn't drink at all, and I liked the bubbly. So one of these things are not like the other. But one thing that we really did come together with was an insufferable to others quality that we both shared in ourselves, that we would quote Monster Squad for no reason at all times of the day. The Wolfmans Got Nards thing is a huge thing, but there's other ones too, like Melissa's brother bringing up.
Rudy, You dropped your candy bar, EJ.
My favorite line of all time is, "Hey, fat kid, nice job. My name is Horace."
Hey, fat kid. Good job.
My name is Horace.
I'm 40, so I literally, my brothers, my cousins, we watched this movie nonstop. Like, we grew up just obsessed with this movie. And actually, I wanted to mention that there's another movie, I think you know where I'm going with this, but there's this other movie, The Goonies, that they was often compared, and I just never took to The Goonies. It was always Monster Squad. That's it. And people kept comparing them. I'm like, how can you even compare?
That's true.
The Ryan Stick Show.